The merciless Arizona sun beat down on the barren landscape where Rebecca Hayes lay abandoned, her parched lips cracked and bleeding, her once vibrant auburn hair matted with dust and sweat. 3 days ago, she'd been the respected wife of a frontier doctor with dreams of building a new life. Now at 28, she was a widow cast out by the very community she had helped nurture, left to die with nothing but the tattered dress on her back and the relentless desert stretching endlessly before her. What the cruel settlers of Silver Creek couldn't have known was that Rebecca's seemingly certain death would instead become the beginning of an extraordinary journey. Her salvation would arrive in the form of a Comanche warrior named Swift Arrow, whose people had every reason to leave this white woman to the fate decreed by her own kind. This is the remarkable true story of how one woman crossed between two worlds, and in doing so helped forge an unexpected bridge between cultures that had known only bloodshed and mistrust. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The summer of 1872 had painted the valleys around Silver Creek, Arizona territory, in hues of golden meadow grass and wildflowers when Rebecca Hayes still believed in the promise of the frontier. She and her husband, Dr. William Hayes, had arrived 2 years earlier, drawn by tales of opportunity and open land. William's medical skills had quickly made him indispensable to the growing settlement, while Rebecca's natural warmth and intelligence had endeared her to many of the town's women. With her knowledge of herbs and midwifery, learned from her grandmother, she often assisted her husband in his practice, particularly with female patients who preferred a woman's touch during childbirth and intimate ailments. Their small cabin on the edge of town doubled as William's medical office, with a room partitioned off for examinations and minor surgeries. Evenings often found them sitting on their modest porch, watching the sunset turn the distant mountains to flame while discussing the day's events and planning for their future. They dreamed of children, a proper medical practice, and becoming respected pillars of what would surely grow into a prosperous town. "One day," William would say, raising his coffee cup toward the half-constructed church visible from their porch, "they'll name a street after me. Dr. Hayes Boulevard has a fine ring to it, don't you think?" Rebecca would smile at his ambition, more focused on the community they were building than any personal recognition. "I'd settle for indoor plumbing and a proper school for our future children," she'd tease, though she never doubted his abilities or their shared vision. That vision shattered on a sweltering Tuesday in July when a desperate rider from the Jackson ranch 20 miles south arrived, his horse lathered and near collapse. "Fever's taken hold at the main house," he gasped, barely dismounting before delivering his news. "3 of the children and Mr. Jackson himself. Mrs. Jackson begs for the doctor to come." William didn't hesitate, despite having just returned from a difficult birth at the Miller homestead. "Pack my bags with extra quinine and willow bark," he instructed Rebecca as he gulped down water and gathered his surgical kit. "I might be gone 2 or 3 days if it's the marsh fever." Rebecca protested briefly, concerned about his own health after so little rest, but William's sense of duty prevailed. "These people have nowhere else to turn," he reminded her, kissing her forehead before mounting his horse. "I'll be back before you have time to miss me." Those were the last words she would hear from her husband. 5 days passed with no word from the Jackson Ranch. By the 6th day, Rebecca had convinced Jeremiah Parker, the blacksmith's son, to ride with her to check on William. What they found was a homestead in mourning, not just for the 2 Jackson children who had succumbed to the fever, but for Dr. Hayes himself, who had collapsed on the 4th day of his tireless efforts to save the family. He never stopped, Mrs. Jackson told Rebecca, her own face gaunt with grief and exhaustion. Even when the fever began to take him, he refused to rest until my husband's fever broke. By then, it was too late for him. She pressed William's medical bag and pocket watch into Rebecca's trembling hands. He saved 4 lives in this house. I wish to God we could have saved his. The return journey to Silver Creek passed in a fog of disbelief. Rebecca barely registered the sympathetic words from Jeremiah, the harsh landscape blurring through her tears as they traveled the dusty trail home. William had been her world, partner, friend, the future father of her children. Without him, the frontier suddenly seemed vast and hostile, their snug cabin an empty shell rather than a home. Silver Creek received the news of Dr. Hayes's death with genuine sorrow. William had been well respected, the only trained medical professional within 50 miles. For 3 days, visitors streamed to Rebecca's door with covered dishes, awkward condolences, and concerned questions about who would tend to their medical needs now. It was Martha Stewart, the minister's wife, who first verbalized what would become Rebecca's undoing. "You assisted your husband quite extensively, didn't you, dear?" she asked, her tone carefully measured as she arranged a casserole on Rebecca's kitchen table. "Perhaps you might continue some of his more basic services, under appropriate supervision, of course." Rebecca, still numb with grief, had nodded without fully comprehending the implications. "I know his methods for many common ailments, and I've delivered babies before William arrived to help." Martha's tight smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, that's a comfort. Though, of course, Reverend Stewart would need to consider the propriety of a woman practicing medicine without her husband's guidance. We must observe proper Christian boundaries." But it wasn't Christian boundaries that would ultimately turn Silver Creek against Rebecca Hayes. It was fear, superstition, and the perfect timing of unfortunate events. 2 weeks after William's funeral, Rebecca was called to the Cooper farm, where 16-year-old Emma Cooper had gone into difficult labor. With her first child, Rebecca arrived to find the girl feverish and exhausted after 12 hours of unproductive labor. The baby turned wrong according to Rebecca's experienced hands. "I can turn the child," she assured Emma's terrified mother, rolling up her sleeves and preparing the herbal infusion William had taught her to use in such cases. "But we must act quickly." Hours later, Emma's son arrived, healthy, squalling, and perfect in every way. Emma herself, however, continued to bleed despite all of Rebecca's efforts. By morning, the young mother was gone. Her bewildered husband, James, left with a newborn son and no wife. Before Rebecca had even returned to her cabin, whispers had begun. Emma's mother, wild with grief, claimed Rebecca had used strange potions that had caused the bleeding. Others recalled that Rebecca's grandmother had taught her herbal remedies that seemed suspiciously like the old ways some had left behind in Europe. "My William used those same preparations," Rebecca defended herself when confronted by Reverend Stewart. "They're scientific approaches, not superstition." "Your husband was a trained physician," the Reverend countered. "You are a woman meddling in matters beyond your understanding." The whispers might have faded had disaster not struck again so quickly. A week after Emma's death, a stomach ailment swept through Silver Creek, affecting nearly a dozen families. Rebecca worked tirelessly, preparing the same remedies William would have prescribed, but 3 elderly residents and a 5-year-old child succumbed to the sickness. On a Sunday morning, with half the congregation absent due to illness, Reverend Stewart delivered a thundering sermon about Exodus and the plagues visited upon Egypt. Without naming Rebecca directly, he spoke of strangers bringing calamity, of women who presumed to know better than the natural order established by God. "Since our good doctor's passing," he intoned, his gaze sweeping meaningfully across the congregation, "death has walked more boldly among us. perhaps because certain individuals have invited it with their prideful interference in God's design. By the sermon's end, Rebecca Hayes had been transformed in the minds of many from grieving widow to harbinger of death. The families she had helped now closed their doors at her approach. Former friends crossed the street to avoid speaking with her. Thomas Wright, the town's self-appointed mayor and owner of the general store, delivered the final blow 3 days later. With the sheriff and 2 other men at his back, he confronted Rebecca on her porch. "The town council has met," he announced without preamble. "In light of recent events, we've determined you're to vacate this property immediately." Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. "This is my home. William and I purchased it fairly." Wright's expression remained impassive. "Your husband took payment in trade for many of his services. Without proper documentation, ownership reverts to the town for reassignment to our new doctor, arriving from Boston next month." "That's theft," Rebecca protested, anger temporarily overriding her shock. "Everything I have is here." "You can take personal belongings," Wright conceded, "but the medical supplies, this structure and the land belong to Silver Creek now. You have until sundown tomorrow." "And where am I supposed to go?" Rebecca demanded, looking from face to face for any sign of compassion. Sheriff Miller finally spoke, unable to meet her eyes. "The stage to Tucson leaves at noon tomorrow. Reverend Stewart has collected funds for your ticket. In other words, leave and never return." The message couldn't have been clearer had they posted it on the church door. That night, Rebecca packed her few treasures, William's pocket watch, their wedding photograph, her grandmother's herbal journal, and the family Bible containing her parents' names. Everything else she had built over 2 years of frontier life would remain behind, claimed by people who had once called themselves neighbors and friends. What she couldn't have known, as she wept through those final hours in her home, was that her journey would take her neither to Tucson nor any other white settlement. By the cruel calculation of men like Thomas Wright and Reverend Stewart, a more permanent solution to the Rebecca problem had already been arranged with the stage driver. Shortly after noon the following day, Rebecca Hayes found herself abandoned. In Apache territory, miles from water, without supplies and with no chance of survival, Silver Creek had delivered its final judgment, a death sentence carried out through deliberate abandonment rather than the messier business of a rope. As consciousness began to fade on her 3rd day in the blistering heat, Rebecca thought she saw the approach of mounted figures on the horizon. Her last coherent thought before darkness claimed her was that death had finally come to claim her, though whether it would arrive by dehydration or Apache arrows seemed suddenly unimportant. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The mounted figures Rebecca had glimpsed before losing consciousness were not a mirage born of desperation. 4 Comanche warriors, returning from a successful hunt with fresh deer strapped to their horses, had spotted the unusual shape of a woman's body against the unforgiving landscape. In Comanche territory, anything unexpected warranted investigation. Potential threat or opportunity analyzed with equal caution. Swift Arrow, war chief of the Shadow Water Band, raised his hand to halt his companions as they approached the still form. At 32 winters, he had earned his position through both strategic brilliance and unmatched skill with bow and lance. The scars across his copper skin told stories of battles survived against both rival tribes and the ever-encroaching white settlers. His face, handsome but severe, rarely revealed emotion, a necessity for a leader who regularly made life-or-death decisions for his people. "White woman," his companion Running Fox observed unnecessarily, keeping a wary distance. Far from any settlement, Swift Arrow dismounted gracefully, approaching the seemingly lifeless figure with the practiced caution of a hunter. His people had experienced enough treachery from white settlers to suspect even the most innocent-appearing situation. She breathed still, but barely, he noted in Comanche, crouching beside Rebecca. Her skin had burned an angry red where exposed. To the sun, her lips cracked and bleeding, death hovered close. "Leave her," advised Black Knife, the oldest of the hunting party, his voice carrying the weight of bitter experience. "The whites bring nothing but disease and betrayal. This one was abandoned by her own kind for good reason." Swift Arrow remained, silent, studying Rebecca's face. Even in her desperate state, he recognized unusual beauty, not merely in her features, but in the character they suggested. The hands that lay limp at her sides were clearly those of someone who had worked hard, not the soft, useless appendages of idle white women he had observed at trading posts. A small leather bag had fallen from her grasp, spilling dried herbs, and roots he recognized as healing plants, some used by his own people. "She is a medicine woman," he said, gathering the scattered plants with unexpected gentleness. This changed matters significantly. The Comanche, like all Plains tribes, held healers in special regard, regardless of their origin. Young Thunder, the fourth warrior and Swift Arrow's cousin, shifted uncomfortably atop his horse. "The spirits may have placed her in our path for a reason. My sister's youngest still fights the coughing sickness. Perhaps this woman's medicine could help where ours has failed." Black Knife spat contemptuously. "Or perhaps the whites have discarded a witch whose magic brings death instead of healing." Swift Arrow rose in one fluid motion, decision made. "If the spirits have put her in our path, we must listen." Without further discussion, he lifted Rebecca's limp form and mounted his horse with practiced ease, cradling her across his lap. "I will answer to the council if any question this choice." The return journey to the Comanche encampment took several hours, during which Swift Arrow periodically dripped precious water between Rebecca's parched lips from his own waterskin. Twice he stopped to crush certain plants from her medicine pouch, mixing them with water to form a paste which he spread on her worst burns. His companions watched these ministrations with expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval, but none questioned his authority further. The Comanche camp of the Shadow Water Band spread across a hidden valley nestled among protective hills, invisible until one crested the final ridge. Approximately 60 lodges stood arranged in the traditional circle, with horses, the tribe's greatest wealth, grazing in meadows nearby under the watchful eyes of young herders. Women worked outside many lodges, processing hides or preparing food, while children darted between dwellings in perpetual games of chase and contest. Activity paused as the hunters returned with their unexpected additional cargo. Whispers raced ahead of them as Swift Arrow carried Rebecca's unconscious form toward his own lodge, one of the largest, positioned near the center of the encampment, as befitted his status. Mourning Dove, Swift Arrow's younger sister, who had managed his household since the death of his wife 3 winters past, emerged from the lodge with an expression of shock quickly controlled. At 25, she had already experienced enough of the tribe's struggles with white encroachment to understand the complexity of her brother bringing a white woman into their midst. "She lives?" Mourning Dove asked in Comanche, holding open the lodge entrance. Swift Arrow nodded, ducking to enter the spacious dwelling. "Barely. She needs water, shade, and healing. She carries medicine plants of her own." He laid Rebecca gently on a bed of soft hides, and Mourning Dove immediately knelt beside her, assessing the situation with practiced eyes. Like many Comanche women, she possessed considerable knowledge of healing, though not the specialized training of a medicine woman. "The sun has nearly claimed her," Mourning Dove observed, touching Rebecca's forehead. "Her body burns from within now, not just from without." Before Swift Arrow could respond, the lodge entrance darkened again as Singing Bird, the tribe's elderly medicine woman, entered without announcement, her status granting her access where others would require permission. "I heard," she said, simply, her ancient face as weathered and lined as old leather, revealing nothing of her thoughts. "The spirits bring strange gifts." Swift Arrow stepped back respectfully, making space for the medicine woman's expertise. "She carried these," he said, offering the small bag of herbs he had recovered. "I believe she may be a healer among her people." Singing Bird sniffed the contents of the pouch, her expression shifting slightly, the closest to surprise anyone had seen from her in years. "She knows the old ways," the elder woman murmured. "These are good medicines." For the next several hours, Rebecca remained unconscious as the two Comanche women worked to save her life. They bathed her burned skin with infusions of yucca and Edo trickled water and strengthening broths between her lips and burned purifying herbs in a small ceremonial fire beside her. Swift Arrow left them to their work, though he returned periodically to check on their progress. Outside, he faced the inevitable questions from tribal elders who had gathered near his lodge. "You bring danger to the heart of our people," accused. Stoneface, an older warrior whose family had been decimated by a smallpox epidemic, traced to white traders. "One white person leads to many. She was abandoned to die," Swift Arrow replied evenly. "Left without water or horse in the Sunlands. Her own people cast her out." "All the more reason to question her presence among us," replied Stoneface. "Whites discard only what is worthless or dangerous to them." Swift Arrow's cousin, Young Thunder, spoke up unexpectedly. "Or what threatens them in ways they don't understand. My grandfather told stories of white settlements that feared their own healers, calling them witches and driving them out." This perspective introduced a new possibility that gave even Stoneface pause. The Comanche had observed enough of white behavior to recognize the irrationality of many of their fears and beliefs. The idea that they might reject a gifted healer out of superstition seemed entirely plausible. "She will be my responsibility," Swift Arrow declared, ending further debate with the finality of his tone. "If she brings harm, I will answer for it. Until then, we will learn why the spirits have delivered her to us." As darkness fell across the encampment, Rebecca finally stirred from her death-like stupor. Consciousness returned gradually, sensations filtering through before coherent thought. The unfamiliar softness beneath her, the smell of smoke and herbs, the sound of voices speaking in a language she didn't understand. Her eyes fluttered open to see the weathered face of an elderly native woman studying her with penetrating intensity. Rebecca tried to speak, but her throat produced only a painful rasp. "Drink," Morning Dove instructed in heavily accented English, lifting Rebecca's head to offer a wooden cup filled with cool water infused with mint. Rebecca drank gratefully, the liquid soothing her parched throat. As her vision cleared, she became fully aware of her surroundings. The interior of a large teepee illuminated by firelight, decorated with painted symbols and furnished with beautifully crafted items unfamiliar to her experience. "Where?" she managed to whisper, fear beginning to penetrate her confusion. "You are among the people," Morning Dove answered, her limited English carefully chosen. "The Numanu, you call us Comanche." A jolt of terror shot through Rebecca. Every settler knew stories of Comanche raids, of captives taken and atrocities committed. Yet these women had clearly been caring for her rather than harming her. "Why?" she asked, struggling to sit up but finding herself too weak. Singing Bird spoke rapidly in Comanche, and Morning Dove translated haltingly. "She asks if you are a medicine woman." "We found these." She indicated Rebecca's herb pouch. Rebecca hesitated, remembering how her healing knowledge had been twisted against her in Silver Creek. But something in the older woman's shrewd gaze suggested that honesty would serve better than deception here. "Yes," she admitted. "My grandmother taught me about plants that heal. My husband was a doctor, a medicine man, and I helped him." This response triggered an animated conversation between the two Comanche women that Rebecca couldn't follow. Whatever conclusion they reached seemed positive, as their expressions softened slightly. The lodge entrance opened, admitting a tall, powerfully built Comanche warrior whose commanding presence immediately dominated the space. Rebecca instinctively drew back, clutching the buffalo robe covering her. "He is Swift Arrow," Morning Dove explained. "War chief. He found you dying in the Sunlands and brought you here." Swift Arrow studied Rebecca with unreadable dark eyes. When he spoke, his deep voice carried authority, even though she couldn't understand his words. Morning Dove translated, "He says you were abandoned by your people, left to die. Why?" The direct question pierced through Rebecca's confusion. How could she possibly explain the tangled web of superstition, fear, and opportunity that had led to her abandonment? What answer would make sense to these people who were now inexplicably her rescuers? "They feared me," she said finally, choosing simple truth. "After my husband died, they blamed me for sicknesses I tried to heal. They said I brought death instead of life." When this was translated, Swift Arrow's expression shifted slightly, the first evidence that his impassive demeanor could change. He spoke again, this time at greater length. He says, Morning Dove translated carefully, that white people often fear what they don't understand. The people respect medicine power, even when it comes in unexpected forms. "You will stay until you are strong again. Then we will decide what your presence among us means." With that pronouncement, Swift Arrow departed as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving Rebecca with the realization that her life had been spared. But her future remained entirely uncertain among people known to settlers only through tales of warfare and violence. As Singing Bird and Morning Dove continued their ministrations, Rebecca found herself in the disorienting position of placing her trust in those she had been taught to fear while recovering from the betrayal of those she had considered her community. The irony was not lost on her, even in her weakened state. "Rest. Now," Morning Dove instructed, arranging the buffalo robes more comfortably. "Tomorrow brings enough challenges without borrowing from tonight." Exhaustion pulled Rebecca back toward unconsciousness, but not before she caught the significant glance exchanged between the two Comanche women, a look that suggested her arrival represented something more consequential than the random rescue of an abandoned white woman. Whatever destiny awaited her among the Comanche, Rebecca sensed it had been set in motion long before Swift Arrow had found her dying in the desert. Rebecca's recovery progressed slowly. The severe dehydration and sun exposure had weakened her, more than she initially realized. For the first week in the Comanche camp, she drifted between periods of lucidity and feverish confusion, each awakening bringing the jarring reminder that she was no longer in the world she knew. Morning Dove proved to be a constant presence, tending to Rebecca with a mixture of clinical detachment and growing curiosity. Though their communication remained limited by language barriers, Rebecca quickly learned to recognize the young Comanche woman's expressions, the slight narrowing of her eyes when dissatisfied with Rebecca's attempts to rise too soon, the barely perceptible smile when Rebecca successfully swallowed the bitter medicinal teas prepared by Singing Bird. On the 8th day, Rebecca woke feeling genuinely stronger. Sunlight filtered through the smoke hole of the teepee, illuminating the beautiful craftsmanship of the dwelling. She sat up without the dizziness that had plagued her previous attempts and found Morning Dove sitting nearby, working a bone needle through soft deerskin. "You look better," Morning Dove observed in her limited English, setting aside her sewing. "Today you eat real food, not just medicine broth." "Thank you," Rebecca replied, consciously keeping her voice gentle and grateful. She had quickly learned that survival here would require careful navigation of unfamiliar cultural expectations. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." Mourning Dove tilted her head slightly, considering Rebecca with intelligent eyes. Swift Arrow brought you. He decides about payment. She paused, then added with unexpected directness, Why did your people leave you to die? You do something very bad? The question caught Rebecca off guard. How could she explain the complex tangle of superstition, opportunism, and fear that had driven Silver Creek to condemn her? She chose simplicity over completeness. My husband, the medicine man, died helping others. After he was gone, when people became sick, they blamed me instead of the illness. They said my medicine brought death, not healing. Mourning Dove nodded slowly as if this confirmed something. White people fear what they don't understand, even their own medicine. Before Rebecca could respond, the lodge entrance darkened as Swift Arrow entered, bringing with him the imposing presence she had only glimpsed during fevered moments. In daylight, she could now fully appreciate his impressive stature and the dignity with which he carried himself. His face remained difficult to read, but his eyes, sharp and evaluating, missed nothing as they assessed her improved condition. He and Mourning Dove exchanged rapid Comanche that Rebecca couldn't follow, though she caught her own name, or rather, the Comanche word they had given her, which Mourning Dove had explained meant fire hair because of her auburn locks. Finally, Swift Arrow addressed her directly. You are stronger. Good. His English, though heavily accented, was more fluent than Mourning Dove's. Today you will begin to earn your place. The implication was clear. Her period of passive recovery had ended. Whatever came next would determine her future among these people who owed her nothing and had every historical reason to view her with suspicion. I want to help, Rebecca responded carefully. I have skills. I can work. A flicker of approval crossed Swift Arrow's face. Mourning Dove will show you women's tasks. Singing Bird wants to know your medicine ways. He paused, studying her with that penetrating gaze. Some say I should have left you to die as your people intended. Others say you bring danger. You must show them otherwise. With that blunt assessment, he departed, leaving Rebecca with the weight of expectations she was not entirely sure she could meet. Her survival now depended on proving her worth to people whose language she barely understood and whose customs remained largely mysterious. Mourning Dove helped Rebecca dress in a simple Comanche garment, a soft buckskin dress that replaced the tattered remains of her own clothing. Today you stay near my side, she instructed. Some women angry about you being here, some children. Afraid, you must move slowly. Rebecca's first emergence from the lodge was like stepping onto a foreign planet. Though she had glimpsed Comanche people at a distance during her time on the frontier, being immersed in their community was entirely different. The camp bustled with purposeful activity, women processing hides, preparing food, or crafting necessary items, men maintaining weapons or working with horses. Children engaged in what appeared to be games that doubled as skill-building exercises. All activity paused momentarily as Rebecca appeared. Dozens of eyes turned toward her with expressions ranging from open hostility to wary curiosity. A small child burst into tears and ran to hide behind his mother's skirts. They have never seen white woman except as captive, Mourning Dove explained quietly. Or they have lost family to white soldiers. You must understand this. Rebecca nodded, keeping her posture deliberately unthreatening. I understand. I will follow your lead. The day proved exhausting, both physically and emotionally. Mourning Dove introduced Rebecca to basic women's tasks, showing her how to process a deerskin using Comanche methods, demonstrating the proper way to collect specific wild plants without depleting the source, and teaching her the essential skill of fire maintenance. Though Rebecca had managed a frontier household, many of these techniques differed significantly from those she knew. Equally challenging was navigating the social landscape. Some women moved away when she approached, while others watched her with undisguised suspicion. A few, particularly younger women, showed cautious curiosity, observing her work and occasionally correcting her technique with gestures when language failed. By midday, Rebecca's hands were raw and her back ached from unaccustomed movements, but she persisted without complaint. Her determination to adapt was not merely about survival now. A genuine appreciation for the skill and efficiency of Comanche methods had begun to grow. The most significant moment came when Singing Bird appeared, gesturing for Rebecca to accompany her to a separate lodge used for healing. Inside, a young mother sat holding a feverish child of perhaps 4 years, the same child young Thunder had mentioned when arguing for Rebecca's rescue. "This is Jumping Fawn, and her son, Little Badger," Singing Bird explained through gestures and the few English words she knew. She indicated the child's labored breathing and flushed skin, then pointed to Rebecca's medicine pouch, which had been returned to her. The implication was clear. Help him, if you can. Rebecca understood the test before her. This child's life represented her opportunity to prove the value of her knowledge, and failure could mean her own death or expulsion. She knelt beside the worried mother, smiling gently as she examined the boy. His symptoms suggested a respiratory infection, similar to cases she had treated in Silver Creek. Drawing on her grandmother's teachings and her experience assisting William, Rebecca selected specific herbs from her pouch, then gestured to request water and a cooking vessel. Singing Bird provided these items, watching intently as Rebecca prepared a medicinal tea designed to reduce fever and ease breathing. The Comanche medicine woman occasionally nodded in recognition of certain herbs, though others clearly were unfamiliar to her. "Small sips often," Rebecca instructed, demonstrating the proper administration to Jumping Fawn. She then crushed different herbs into a paste and indicated through gestures that it should be applied to the child's chest. The entire process took place under the unwavering scrutiny of both Singing Bird and the mother. When she had done everything possible, Rebecca sat back, knowing that the results would speak for themselves, either vindicating or condemning her. As dusk approached, Rebecca returned to Swift Arrow's lodge, exhausted beyond measure. Her entire body ached from unaccustomed labor, and the emotional strain of constant vigilance had depleted her remaining energy. Morning Dove prepared a simple meal of stewed meat and wild vegetables, which Rebecca gratefully accepted. "You did well today," Morning Dove remarked, her tone suggesting mild surprise. "Many thought you would cry or give up." "I've worked hard before," Rebecca replied, "though differently than here." Their meal was interrupted by Swift Arrow's return. He spoke briefly with Morning Dove before addressing Rebecca directly. "Little Badger's fever has broken," he stated without preamble. "Singing Bird says your medicine worked differently than ours, but well, the child breathes easier now." Relief flooded through Rebecca. "I'm glad I could help him." Swift Arrow studied her with that same inscrutable expression. "Tomorrow you will work with Singing Bird. She wishes to learn your plant knowledge, and you will learn hers. This exchange benefits both our peoples." The announcement represented a significant shift in her status, from burden to potential asset. Rebecca recognized the opportunity it presented while understanding the responsibility it carried. "I would be honored to learn from her," she responded sincerely. Something almost resembling approval flickered across Swift Arrow's face. "You have surprised many today. They expected weakness." "My people were wrong about me," Rebecca said quietly. "I hope yours will not make the same mistake." That night, as Rebecca lay on her bed of soft furs, her body aching but her mind clearer than it had been since William's death, she reflected on the strange turns of fate. The community that should have protected her had abandoned her to die, while people who had every reason to be enemies had instead offered a chance at a new life, conditional and precarious though it might be. She was not naive enough to believe. She had secured her place among the Comanche. One day of modest success did not erase generations of conflict or the very real dangers her presence might bring to the tribe. Yet for the first time since discovering William's death, Rebecca felt something that resembled hope. Not for a return to her old life, which was irrevocably lost, but for the possibility of creating something new from the ashes of that destruction. Outside, the large night sounds of the camp, distant singing, the nickering of horses, the soft conversations of families gathered around fires, created a tapestry of community that reminded her painfully of what she had lost, while hinting at what she might, with great care and patience, eventually find again. Mourning doves. Sleeping form nearby provided strange comfort. This woman, who was neither friend nor enemy, but something undefined that might, in time, become the former rather than the latter. Even Swift Arrow, whose decision had saved her life but whose true thoughts remained hidden behind that stoic exterior, represented a complex figure in her new reality, protector, judge, and enigma. As sleep finally claimed her, Rebecca's last thought was of little Badger, breathing easier because of her intervention. Perhaps here, among those who should have been strangers, her healing skills would finally be valued rather than feared, a bitter irony that might yet yield unexpected sweetness. The weeks that followed marked a remarkable transformation in Rebecca's place within the Comanche camp. Little Badger's recovery had opened a door that might otherwise have remained firmly closed, allowing her to move from tolerated outsider to someone whose knowledge held tangible value. Each morning, Rebecca now divided her time between learning essential women's skills from Mourning Dove and working alongside Singing Bird in the medicine lodge. The elderly healer, initially skeptical despite the success with Little Badger, maintained a cautious distance as she assessed the depth of Rebecca's knowledge. "Show me how you use this," Singing Bird would demand, through a combination of gestures and the gradually expanding vocabulary they shared, pointing to herbs in Rebecca's dwindling supply or to unfamiliar plants she had gathered. Rebecca demonstrated preparations she had learned from her grandmother and from assisting William: tinctures for pain, poultices for wounds, teas for various internal ailments. Some Singing Bird recognized with approving nods. Others she examined with intense curiosity, testing their properties before incorporating them into her own extensive pharmacopoeia. In turn, Singing Bird introduced Rebecca to the remarkable healing traditions of the Comanche, knowledge developed over countless generations of careful observation and spiritual connection to the land. She showed Rebecca how to locate medicinal plants Rebecca had never encountered, how to harvest in ways that ensured continued growth, and how to prepare remedies according to Comanche methods. Your medicine and our medicine. Different paths. To same river, Singing Bird explained one afternoon, using the metaphorical language that characterized her teaching style. White healers cut the body to fix it. We strengthen the spirit so body remembers how to heal itself. Both work if used with wisdom. This philosophical approach fascinated Rebecca, who had always been drawn to the theoretical aspects of medicine that William had sometimes dismissed as impractical. She began maintaining a journal using pages torn from her grandmother's book, carefully documenting Comanche healing knowledge alongside her own, creating a unique fusion of medical traditions. What began as professional exchange gradually evolved into something resembling mentorship. Though Singing Bird remained reserved, her attitude toward Rebecca softened as she recognized the younger woman's genuine respect for Comanche healing ways and her eagerness to learn rather than dismiss or appropriate. Your hands have healing. Spirit, the elder observed after watching Rebecca successfully treat a warrior's infected wound. Good medicine women rare in any tribe. This growing medical partnership caught the attention of Swift Arrow, who occasionally observed their work. With an unreadable expression, though he rarely spoke directly to Rebecca, she became aware of his heightened interest when Singing Bird began teaching her the sacred aspects of Comanche healing, the ceremonies, prayers, and spiritual practices that complemented physical remedies. Should these things be shared with an outsider? She overheard him asking Singing Bird in one of their rare English exchanges. The old medicine woman's response was characteristically direct. Medicine knowledge follows its own path. The spirits have guided her here for purpose we may not yet understand. I share what they direct me to share, no more. Swift Arrow had accepted this answer with obvious respect for the elder's spiritual authority, though his gaze had lingered thoughtfully on Rebecca afterward. Beyond the medicine lodge, Rebecca's integration into daily Comanche life progressed with cautious momentum. Mourning Dove proved an exacting but fair teacher, correcting Rebecca's attempts at essential skills, fire building, cooking, hide processing, with surprising patience. Through persistent effort, Rebecca's hands grew stronger and more capable, developing calluses that matched those of the Comanche women. You learn quickly for white woman, Mourning Dove remarked one evening as they prepared the evening meal together. Most white women taken as captives cry for many moons, refusing to work or learn our ways. The comment, though delivered matter-of-factly, reminded Rebecca of her unusual status, neither captive nor guest, existing in an undefined space between worlds. I have no other home to cry for, she responded simply, and I prefer useful. Work to useless tears. Mourning Dove nodded, seeming to appreciate the pragmatism of this perspective. My brother watches you, she observed, changing subjects abruptly. He says little, but his eyes follow when you work with Singing Bird. Rebecca had indeed noticed Swift Arrow's increased presence, though he maintained a careful distance. I hope he sees that I'm trying to earn my place here, she replied cautiously. Mourning Dove's expression revealed nothing. Perhaps, or perhaps he sees woman who walks between worlds, like he does. Before Rebecca could question this cryptic observation, young Thunder arrived at the lodge entrance, speaking rapidly to Mourning Dove in Comanche. She responded with obvious concern before turning to Rebecca. Riders coming, many horses. Swift Arrow calls all women and children to gather in center of camp. Men prepare for possible fighting. Rebecca's heart pounded as she followed Mourning Dove toward the center of the encampment, where families were already assembling. The possibility of violence shattered the tentative peace she had begun to establish, reminding her forcefully of her precarious position. If the approaching riders were U.S. cavalry or Texas Rangers, her presence among the Comanche could be interpreted in countless dangerous ways. Swift Arrow stood with several warriors at the camp's edge, watching dust clouds approach from the western ridge. His posture revealed nothing of his thoughts, but the readiness of his stance suggested he anticipated potential conflict. Who comes? Rebecca asked Mourning Dove quietly. Not known yet. Could be friendly tribe bringing trade goods. Could be enemies. The matter-of-fact way she included potential combat in everyday possibilities struck Rebecca anew with the realities of Comanche existence. As the riders came into view, Rebecca felt simultaneous relief and complicated tension. Not soldiers, but not friendly visitors either, a mixed group of white traders and Mexican vaqueros, their packed horses laden with goods. Hudson's trading party, Mourning Dove identified them. Come twice yearly, bring metal goods, cloth, coffee, trade for furs and horses. She hesitated before adding, they will see you, this creates problems. The implications were immediately clear. A white woman living among the Comanche would generate dangerous assumptions, that she was a captive, that she needed rescuing, that the tribe was responsible for her presence. Such assumptions had triggered violence between whites and native peoples countless times before. Swift Arrow evidently recognized the same danger. Before the traders reached the camp's edge, he approached the gathering of women and spoke directly to Rebecca. "These men cannot know you are here by choice," he stated without preamble. "They will not understand or believe. They will try to take you, or bring soldiers later to take you. This endangers everyone." Rebecca nodded, already understanding what he would ask. "What should I do?" "Go with Singing Bird to Medicine Lodge. Stay hidden until they leave. If discovered, you must pretend to be prisoner who fears escape." His direct gaze held hers. "Can you do this to protect the people who have protected you?" The question carried layers of significance, testing her loyalty, her understanding of the complex situation, her willingness to act against the expectations of her own race. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "I have no desire to return. To those who left me to die." Something flickered in Swift Arrow's eyes, approval perhaps, or surprise at her ready agreement. "Go now. The trading will last 2 days." Rebecca followed Singing Bird to the medicine lodge at the camp's edge, where the medicine woman quickly showed her a hidden storage pit beneath the floor coverings, a space normally used for sacred objects that needed protection from unauthorized eyes. "You stay here," Singing Bird instructed. "I bring food when safe. Make no sound when strangers near." For 2 days, Rebecca remained hidden, emerging only briefly when Singing Bird confirmed. No traders were nearby. From her concealment, she could occasionally hear the negotiations taking place. Hudson's booming voice, haggling over steel knives and bolts of cloth. The responses of Comanche men, mediated through a Mexican interpreter who spoke both Spanish and basic Comanche. On the second afternoon, disaster nearly struck. Rebecca had emerged to stretch her cramped limbs when voices approached the medicine lodge unexpectedly. She barely had time to drop back into the storage pit, Singing Bird swiftly covering the opening with a woven mat and ceremonial objects before 2 men entered. "The old witch doctor might have something for that toothache," Hudson's voice boomed. "These savages know their plants, whatever else they lack." Through the small gaps in the covering, Rebecca could see Singing Bird's expression remain impassive, despite the insult, as she gestured for them to leave the sacred space. The trader's companion, a younger man with a swollen jaw, looked around. Nervously. "Don't much like being in their magic place, Mr. Hudson. Bad enough trading with them without riling up their spirits." "Superstitious nonsense," Hudson dismissed, though he too seemed uncomfortable in the medicine lodge. "Ask her if she's got something for his tooth, Miguel," the interpreter translated, and Singing Bird nodded slowly, deliberately taking her time, selecting herbs while keeping the men's attention away from the hidden pit where Rebecca held her breath. Finally, she handed the young man a small packet of dried plants with gestures indicating how to use them. As they turned to leave, Hudson paused, his attention caught by something at the edge of the fire pit, a scrap of paper that had fallen from Rebecca's journal during her hasty concealment. "What's this then?" he muttered, bending to retrieve it. "Looks like white man's writing." Rebecca's heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone must hear it. If he examined the paper closely, he would see notes in her handwriting, evidence no Comanche could have produced. Singing Bird moved with surprising speed for her age, snatching the paper and tossing it into the fire with a rapid string of Comanche words that the interpreter translated haltingly. "She says it's bad medicine. Paper from dead white trader. Must be burned or bring sickness." Hudson stepped back quickly, his contempt for superstition apparently not extending to risks with his own health. Damn savages and their notions. "Come on, boy, let's finish our business and get back to civilization." After they departed, Rebecca remained hidden until Singing Bird gave the signal that it was truly safe. As she emerged from the pit, stiff and shaken, The old medicine woman regarded her with an expression that mingled concern with something deeper, a shared understanding of the danger they had navigated together. "You protected me," Rebecca said simply. "Put yourself at risk." Singing Bird nodded. "You are learning our medicine. This makes you numunu in ways that matter most." That evening, after the traders had departed with their newly acquired furs and Comanche-bred horses, Swift Arrow came to the medicine lodge. His gaze moved between Rebecca and Singing Bird, noting their unified front with apparent approval. "Hudson asked if we had seen white settlers recently," he informed them. "If we had taken any captives. I told him our band raids only for horses, not people." "Did he believe you?" Rebecca asked. "He believes what profits him to believe," Swift Arrow replied, with unexpected cynicism. "For now, it profits him to trade without trouble, but he watches, and he will remember anything unusual." The incident had revealed the precarious reality of Rebecca's position more clearly than any words could express. Her presence represented a continuing danger to the very people who had saved her life, a bitter truth she could no longer ignore. "Perhaps I should leave," she suggested, the words difficult but necessary. "Find somewhere far from here, where I won't bring this risk to your people." Swift Arrow's response surprised her. "And go where?" "To other whites who would not understand. Why you live with savages. To other tribes who would see only your white skin." He shook his head decisively. "No. You have begun a path here. The spirits guided you to us for purpose. We will find way to protect both you and the people." The certainty in his voice carried an authority that brooked no argument. Whatever Swift Arrow's initial reservations had been about rescuing her, he had clearly moved beyond them to some new determination that Rebecca could not yet fully comprehend. As she returned to his lodge that night, walking beside Morning Dove under a sky blazing with stars, Rebecca reflected on how completely her understanding of savages and civilization had been upended. The people Silver Creek had taught her to fear had shown her more compassion and acceptance than those who shared her blood and background. The irony was not lost on her that she now feared discovery by her own race more than she feared the Comanche, who had once represented the frontier's greatest terror in settler imaginations. Somewhere between the medicine lodge and women's daily work, between Singing Bird's ancient wisdom and Morning Dove's practical teachings, she had begun to find not just survival, but belonging, tentative and fragile though it might be. Season of falling leaves arrived, painting the landscape in vivid golds and crimsons as the Comanche prepared for the coming winter. After nearly 3 months among the Shadow Water Band, Rebecca had established a delicate equilibrium, neither fully accepted nor actively rejected, occupying a unique space created by her medical knowledge and Swift Arrow's continued protection. The close call with Hudson's trading party had subsided into uncomfortable memory, but its implications lingered. Rebecca sensed a subtle shift in the camp's atmosphere whenever she moved beyond the immediate vicinity of Swift Arrow's lodge or the medicine dwelling. Mothers still occasionally pulled children closer when she passed, and certain elders maintained a palpable hostility despite her contributions to the tribe's well-being. "Stoneface speaks against you in council," Morning Dove informed her one crisp morning as they gathered wild amaranth seeds for winter storage. "He says your presence brings the eyes of white soldiers upon our camp." Rebecca paused in her work, the familiar weight of guilt settling across her shoulders. "Is he wrong? The traders almost discovered me?" Morning Dove continued efficiently, stripping seeds into her basket. "Stoneface lost wife and daughters to Texas Rangers 6 winters ago. His heart is wrapped in old bandages that have never been changed. The wound festers beneath." The metaphor, so characteristic of Comanche expression, needed no further explanation. Rebecca had encountered similar implacable grief in Silver Creek, wounds so deep that reason could find no purchase against their jagged edges. "What does Swift Arrow say when Stoneface speaks this way?" she asked, trying to sound casual, despite the significance of the question. Mourning Dove's quick glance suggested she recognized the deeper inquiry beneath Rebecca's words. "My brother reminds the council that your medicine has healed 15 people since the hot moons. That singing bird says your knowledge of white sicknesses may protect us when traders bring invisible enemies." She paused before adding, "He also says that the people have always adopted those from other tribes who bring valuable skills. That pale skin does not matter if the heart underneath beats with respect for Comanche ways." This revelation, that Swift Arrow actively defended her presence in council meetings, sparked a complex reaction in Rebecca. Gratitude mingled with a deeper feeling she was not yet prepared to examine closely. Before she could formulate a response, a commotion erupted from the direction of the camp, shouts and the pounding of approaching hoofbeats. Mourning Dove instantly abandoned her seed gathering, motioning for Rebecca to follow as they rushed back toward the encampment. They arrived to find the camp in controlled chaos. Warriors mounted horses, while women quickly gathered children and moved toward the center of the settlement. A hunting party had returned unexpectedly, their urgent news spreading rapidly through the assembled people. Swift Arrow stood at the center, issuing calm but firm directions as Rebecca and Mourning Dove approached. His gaze briefly met Rebecca's, before returning to the messenger. "What happens?" Rebecca asked Mourning Dove quietly. "Scouts saw blue coats, soldiers, many horses moving north along river path," Mourning Dove replied, her expression tightening. "They do not appear to search for our camp, but we must be cautious." The mention of soldiers sent a chill through Rebecca. U.S. cavalry in the territory could have countless implications, none of them favorable for her precarious position. Stoneface's voice rose above the general commotion, his weathered face contorted with accusation as he pointed directly at Rebecca. The rapid Comanche was incomprehensible to her, but the sentiment required no translation. Blame, pure and unequivocal, directed at the white woman among them. Other voices joined his, creating a swell of hostile energy that radiated toward Rebecca like physical heat. She stood motionless, understanding that any defensive action would only confirm their suspicions. Swift Arrow's command cut through the growing tension, his authoritative voice silencing the accusatory chorus. He spoke at length, his tone level but carrying an unmistakable warning. Mourning Dove translated in hurried whispers. He says soldiers have no reason to know you are here, that they follow orders to patrol territory after raids by horse stealing. Banned to the south, that Stoneface dishonors himself by attacking a woman who has healed his own grandson. This last revelation surprised Rebecca. She had treated many children in recent weeks, but had not known any were related to her most vehement critic. Swift Arrow concluded with a declaration that Mourning Dove translated with evident approval. "My brother says the camp will move to winter grounds earlier than planned, that hidden valleys will protect us from unwanted eyes, that the council has already decided this path, and further argument brings division when unity is needed." Stoneface subsided, though his glare at Rebecca suggested the confrontation had merely been postponed rather than resolved. The encampment quickly transformed into efficient activity, as everyone turned to the well-practiced process of breaking camp. A mobile people accustomed to rapid relocation when circumstances demanded. "Help me prepare lodge for travel," Mourning Dove instructed, leading Rebecca back to Swift Arrow's dwelling. "We leave when sun touches mountaintop." The complexities of dismantling a Comanche teepee were still relatively unfamiliar to Rebecca, but she followed Mourning Dove's directions with the best speed she could manage, As they worked, she became aware of a hostile presence, Stoneface's eldest daughter, tall Willow, watching from nearby with undisguised contempt. Unlike her father's raw anger, tall Willow's opposition manifested as cold disdain. A woman of perhaps 30 winters, she had lost both husband and son to conflicts with white settlers. Her status as a skilled craftswoman and member of a respected family granted her significant influence among the camp's women. Influence she had increasingly used to isolate Rebecca from broader female companionship. "She says you bring bad spirits," Morning Dove murmured, noticing Rebecca's awareness of the woman's surveillance. "That white woman's presence offends ancestors." Rebecca continued her work, maintaining dignified silence in the face of this scrutiny. She had learned that certain forms of opposition could not be countered with words. Only consistent actions over time might eventually shift such deeply rooted animosity. By mid-afternoon, the entire encampment had been efficiently packed onto travois pulled by horses. Rebecca rode double with Morning Dove, acutely conscious of the whispers that followed them as the procession moved through the golden autumn landscape toward winter grounds nestled deeper in the hills. The journey took 2 days, following paths deliberately chosen to obscure their trail from any potential pursuers. Their destination proved to be a sheltered valley surrounded by protective ridges, a natural fortress accessible only through narrow passes easily defended if necessary. As they established the winter camp, arranging lodges in the traditional circle with consideration for family relationships and tribal status, Rebecca became aware of a subtle shift in her practical situation. Swift Arrow's tipi was now positioned at the most defensible point of the encampment, with Singing Bird's medicine lodge directly adjacent, effectively placing Rebecca at the protected core of the settlement, despite the opposition she faced. The strategic implications of this arrangement became clear that evening when Swift Arrow called her to join a small council, including Singing Bird, Young Thunder, and Morning Dove. They gathered around the fire in Swift Arrow's lodge, the dancing, flames illuminating solemn faces. "The soldiers will not find us here," Swift Arrow began without preamble, "but Stoneface and others who think like him represent different danger. They believe your presence brings misfortune." Rebecca nodded, accepting this reality without defensiveness. "I understand their fear. In their position, I might feel the same." Singing Bird made a sound of approval at this acknowledgement. "Understanding is first medicine for healing old wounds," Swift Arrow continued, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. "Winter changes many things. People stay closer together. Small disagreements grow larger when contained by snow and cold." "What he means," Young Thunder interjected with characteristic directness, "is that Stoneface will have more opportunities to turn others against you during winter moons." Morning Dove added softly, "Some already listen to him, say that game will be scarce because white woman's presence offends the spirits, that children will sicken because ancestors are angry." The familiar pattern of superstition twisted around. Misfortune sent a chill through Rebecca that had nothing to do with the evening's cooling temperatures. She had witnessed the same dangerous progression in Silver Creek, how quickly rational people could embrace supernatural explanations for natural hardships when fear and prejudice provided fertile ground. "What can I do?" she asked simply. "How can I prove I bring no harm?" Swift Arrow exchanged significant glances with Singing Bird before responding. "There is one path that would silence many voices against you, one way to move you from outside to inside our circle." A moment of confusion preceded understanding as Rebecca grasped his meaning. "You mean marriage?" The word emerged as barely more than a whisper. Morning Dove nodded. "If you became Comanche through proper marriage, those who speak against you would lose strongest arguments. You would be people, not white woman living among us." The practical logic was undeniable, yet the emotional implications staggered her. Marriage among the Comanche was not the rigid, lifelong institution she had known in white society. She had learned enough to understand that unions could be formed and dissolved with relative ease when circumstances warranted. Nevertheless, it represented a profound commitment to a culture she was still learning to navigate. Who would... She began, then faltered, unable to complete the question that suddenly seemed too intimate for this circle. Swift Arrow's gaze met hers directly, answering her unfinished inquiry. I would take you as wife. As war chief, my choice cannot be easily challenged. As a widower with no current wife, no woman is dishonored by this arrangement. The stark proposal, delivered without romantic pretense, nonetheless sent a flush of warmth through Rebecca that contradicted the pragmatic context. She had grown increasingly aware of Swift Arrow as more than her protector. His quiet strength, unfailing fairness, and occasional glimpses of unexpected gentleness had awakened. Feelings she had believed buried with William. This is not demanded, he added, perhaps misinterpreting her silence. It is one path that offers protection. There may be others. Singing Bird's raspy voice cut through the awkward moment. The spirits have been preparing this path since they guided Swift Arrow to find you dying in the Sunlands. I have seen signs. This union would bring strength to the people, not weakness as Stoneface claims. Rebecca looked from face to face, reading sincere concern in each expression. This was not merely a political solution, but a gesture of inclusion from those who had come to value her presence, despite the complications it created. I need time to consider, she said finally. This is no small decision. Swift Arrow nodded, respect evident in his expression. The first snow has not yet fallen. There is time for the heart to listen to the spirit's guidance. As the small council dispersed, Mourning Dove remained behind, helping Rebecca prepare her sleeping furs in the women's section of the lodge. Her expression suggested she had insights yet unshared. My brother does not act from duty alone, she said quietly when they were certain of privacy. I have seen how his eyes follow you, how he speaks your name. Rebecca smoothed the fur covering with methodical care, buying moments to compose her response. Marriage among your people can end, easily if it proves unwise. Among mine, it is meant to be forever. Mourning Dove's knowing smile held generations of feminine wisdom. Forever is found in many small todays lived with open hearts. The path between two people, like the path between two worlds, is walked one step at a time. As Rebecca settled beneath the warm buffalo robes that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the winter camp settling around her, she faced the most consequential decision since agreeing to follow William to the frontier years earlier. The offer of marriage represented more than personal safety. It required choosing between worlds in a way that could never be entirely undone. Beyond the lodge walls, she could sense the presence of unseen stars following their ancient paths across the heavens. Somewhere in that vast darkness, perhaps William would understand the impossible choice before her, and forgive her for considering a future he could never have imagined for the young woman he had once called wife. The first snowfall arrived, 3 days after Swift Arrow's unexpected proposal, blanketing the winter camp in pristine white that muffled sounds and transformed the landscape into something magical and otherworldly. Rebecca stood at the entrance of the medicine lodge, watching children shriek with delight as they chased each other through the freshly fallen snow, their breath visible in the crisp air. During these days of contemplation, she had maintained a careful distance from Swift Arrow, focusing on her work with Singing Bird while she wrestled with the monumental decision before her. The old medicine woman had respected her need for reflection, limiting conversation to practical matters of healing and winter preparations. You avoid my brother, Mourning Dove observed as she joined Rebecca at the lodge entrance, her arms filled with dried herbs they had been cataloguing. His pride is wounded, though he would never speak of it. Rebecca sighed, watching her breath form clouds in the cold air. I'm not avoiding him. I'm trying to be certain of my own heart before I give him an answer. In truth, her hesitation stemmed, not from uncertainty about Swift Arrow himself, but from the weight of what this decision represented. Marriage to him would permanently alter her identity, closing doors to her former life while opening passages to a future she could never have imagined for herself. The winter solstice celebration begins tomorrow, Morning Dove noted. A powerful, in time for new beginnings, the sun's rebirth reminds us that what seems ended can begin again, in different form. The gentle hint was clear. The tribe awaited her decision, and the ceremonial occasion offered an appropriate moment for either acceptance or refusal of Swift Arrow's proposal. Rebecca nodded, understanding the unspoken deadline. I'll speak with him today, she promised. She found Swift Arrow at the horse enclosure on the camp's edge, where he worked alongside other men to ensure the animals had adequate shelter and feed for the deepening winter. He noticed her approach immediately, though he continued his task as she waited respectfully at the perimeter. When the work was completed, he walked toward her with the measured dignity that characterized his movements. His dark eyes revealed nothing of his thoughts as he gestured for her to accompany him away from curious onlookers. They walked in silence along a narrow path through snow-covered junipers until reaching a small clearing overlooking the valley. The winter camp spread below them, smoke rising from lodge tops into the clear blue sky, a scene of surprising beauty and tranquility. "You have considered my proposal," Swift Arrow stated rather than asked, his deep voice carrying in the still. Ere Rebecca gathered her courage, facing him directly. "I have. Before I give my answer, I need to understand something." She paused, searching for the right words. Is this only for protection and political peace within the tribe? Or is there... She faltered, unused to such direct discussion of feelings. Among her people, courtship followed different patterns, with emotions often carefully obscured beneath propriety and convention. Swift Arrow's expression softened slightly, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the war chief's composed exterior. "When I found you dying in the Sunlands, I saw only a white woman who might bring value to our people through her medicine knowledge. I did not see Rebecca." His use of her actual name rather than Firehair carried significance she couldn't. "Miss," it was the first time he had spoken it aloud. "Now I see Rebecca," he continued, his usual formality giving way to unexpected eloquence. "A woman of courage, who has walked between worlds without losing her center, who has faced stone faces, hatred without showing fear, who has learned our ways with respect instead of judgment." He paused, then added with quiet intensity, "I offer marriage for the tribe's peace, yes, but also because my lodge feels empty when you are not in it." The simple honesty of this declaration moved Rebecca more deeply than any flowery profession of love might have done. Swift Arrow was a man of actions rather than words, making these carefully chosen statements all the more meaningful. "My heart has been traveling toward yours since you saved me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I feared that all you saw was the white healer, useful but always separate." Swift Arrow stepped closer, his proximity sending warmth through her, despite the winter chill. "The people say that souls recognize each other beyond skin and language. Perhaps ours knew each other in the spirit world before finding this life." Rebecca smiled at this characteristically Comanche perspective, simultaneously practical and deeply spiritual. "Then my answer is yes, I will become your wife according to the ways of the people." The subtle shift in Swift Arrow's expression, a softening around the eyes, the barest hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth, spoke volumes about his private response to her acceptance. Publicly, however, he maintained the dignified reserve expected of a war chief. "The solstice ceremony tomorrow is good time," he said. "Singing Bird will prepare you." They returned to camp, walking slightly apart, maintaining appropriate appearances, though Rebecca sensed a new connection. Flowing between them, unspoken but undeniably present, news of their impending marriage spread rapidly through the winter encampment. Reactions varied predictably. Singing Bird and Young Thunder expressed approval. Many women displayed cautious curiosity about this unprecedented union, while Stoneface and his faction maintained sullen disapproval. That evening, as Rebecca helped prepare the evening meal in Swift Arrow's lodge, Morning Dove presented her with a beautifully crafted buckskin dress adorned with intricate beadwork in patterns of blue and white. "I made this for you," she explained, obvious pride in her craftsmanship evident as she displayed the garment. "For tomorrow's ceremony, a proper Comanche bride should have new dress to begin new life." Rebecca touched the soft material reverently, recognizing the countless hours of skilled work represented in its creation. "It's beautiful. I don't deserve such a gift." Morning Dove's expression turned serious. "You face difficult path with courage. You heal our people despite those who speak against you. This is worthy of honor." A smile softened her features as she added, "Besides, soon you will be my sister in truth, not just in daily living." This simple acceptance, the transformation, from outsider to family, moved Rebecca unexpectedly. She embraced Morning Dove impulsively, surprising both of them with this display of emotion. The winter solstice dawned clear and bracingly cold. Rebecca spent the morning with Singing Bird, who instructed her in the traditional preparations for a Comanche marriage ceremony. These included ritualized bathing with special herbs, prayers to ancestral spirits, and careful arrangement of her hair with symbolic ornaments representing key virtues valued in a Comanche wife: strength, wisdom, and fertility. "Marriage among the people is not like white marriage," Singing Bird explained as she worked. "Woman keeps her own property, her own voice in council, can leave husband if he proves unworthy. But good marriage is partnership that makes both stronger, like braided sweetgrass." Rebecca nodded, having observed enough of Comanche family life to understand the fundamental differences from the patriarchal structure she had known. Women here owned the lodges, controlled food distribution, and exercised significant autonomy within clearly defined domains of responsibility. As sun began its early winter descent, the tribe gathered for the solstice celebration. Fires burned brightly around the central clearing, where elders recounted origin stories and young people performed traditional dances celebrating the sun's rebirth. Even Stoneface participated in the community rituals, temporarily setting aside his opposition to honor sacred traditions. During a natural pause in the festivities, Swift Arrow stepped into the central circle, his presence immediately commanding attention. He wore formal attire befitting his status, a magnificent war bonnet, finely crafted leather breastplate adorned with bear claws, and ceremonial paint accentuating the strong planes of his face. In clear Comanche, that Morning Dove translated. Softly for Rebecca, he announced his intention to take Firehair as wife, citing her contributions to the tribe through healing knowledge and her demonstrated respect for Comanche ways. Following his declaration, Rebecca was led forward by Singing Bird and Morning Dove. Wearing the beautiful dress Morning Dove had created, her auburn hair partially braided in Comanche style with decorative shells and beads woven through the strands, she presented a striking figure, neither fully white nor Comanche, but something new that incorporated elements of both identities. The ceremony itself proved surprisingly simple. Swift Arrow and Rebecca stood facing each other while Singing Bird bound their wrists together with a braided cord of horsehair and buffalo wool. The medicine woman spoke ancient words invoking ancestral protection, then presented the couple. with symbolic gifts, an eagle feather representing vision and courage, a small pouch of sacred medicines symbolizing health and harmony. The final step required both participants to declare their intentions before the assembled community. Swift Arrow spoke first, his deep voice carrying clearly through the winter air. "I take this woman as wife according to Comanche ways. I will provide for her, protect her, and honor her wisdom. She enters my lodge as equal, not as captive or servant. Her medicine belongs to the people, as does my strength." When Rebecca's turn came, Mourning Dove had prepared a simple declaration in Comanche that Rebecca had carefully memorized. She spoke the unfamiliar words slowly but clearly, her pronunciation carefully coached by Mourning Dove over preceding days. "I join with this man willingly, accepting the ways of the people as my ways. I offer my healing knowledge, my loyal heart, and my future children to strengthen the Comanche nation. My past is behind me. My path now follows the buffalo road beside my husband." A murmur passed through the watching crowd at hearing the white woman speak their language, a small but significant demonstration of her commitment to her new identity. Even Stoneface's expression registered surprise, though he quickly masked it with renewed stoicism. Singing Bird untied the binding cord, wrapping half around each of their wrists. "These remain with you to remind of today's promises," she instructed. "When difficulties come, remember how two strands create strength through joining." With these final words, the ceremony concluded. Swift Arrow took Rebecca's hand, the first public display of affection he had permitted himself, and led her in a ceremonial circle around the central fire. The tribe acknowledged the union with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Close friends and family offering congratulations, neutral members showing appropriate respect, Stoneface's faction maintaining cold silence. That evening, the celebration continued with feasting and storytelling around the fires. Rebecca sat beside Swift Arrow in the place of honor, acutely aware of the scrutiny directed toward them. Each interaction, each moment, now carried additional significance as the tribe watched to see how this unprecedented union would unfold. Young Thunder approached during the festivities, offering a gift of a finely crafted knife with an antler handle. "For the new wife of my cousin," he said with the easy smile that characterized his more relaxed approach to life compared to Swift Arrow's seriousness. "May it serve you well in cutting plants for your medicines." Rebecca accepted the thoughtful gift with appropriate expressions of gratitude, recognizing the public support it represented. Throughout the evening, similar gestures accumulated. A basket of dried berries from a mother whose child Rebecca had healed, a beautifully tanned rabbit skin from an elderly woman who nodded approval of Rebecca's ceremonial words. These small offerings, more than the formal ceremony itself, marked the beginning of her genuine acceptance by at least some portion of the community. Each represented a tiny victory against the barrier of distrust her presence had initially created, fragile bridges being constructed one gesture at a time. As darkness deepened and the celebration continued around them, Swift Arrow leaned close to speak privately, his breath warm against her ear. "It begins well. The people watch and judge, but many already open their hearts to you." Rebecca nodded, maintaining appropriate dignity despite the flutter his proximity created. "I will work each day to deserve their trust. And mine?" he asked, a rare hint of vulnerability visible only to her in the firelight. She met his gaze directly, allowing him to see the truth in her eyes. "Yours you already have, earned when you found a dying woman and chose compassion over hatred." The subtle softening of his expression told her he understood the depth of feeling behind her words. Tomorrow would bring the practical realities of their new relationship, but tonight was for beginnings, for small victories accumulated into something that might, with care and patience, grow into genuine belonging. Winter deepened across the land, transforming the Comanche's hidden valley into an isolated world of ice and snow. For the first time since William's death, Rebecca experienced a sense of genuine security, not merely physical safety, but emotional anchoring that allowed her to fully inhabit her new identity rather than merely survive from day to day. Marriage to Swift Arrow proved different from her expectations in countless small ways. Their relationship unfolded gradually with a thoughtful deliberateness that reflected his character. Unlike William, whose affection had been openly demonstrated from their earliest courtship, Swift Arrow expressed his growing regard through actions rather than words, ensuring she had the finest portion of meat at meals, carving beautiful wooden implements to aid her medical work, listening attentively when she shared her knowledge. "My brother speaks little, but watches much," Mourning Dove observed one afternoon as they worked together scraping a deer hide in the women's work area. For Comanche men, especially warriors, feelings belong to private spaces, not public displays. Rebecca nodded, having already observed this cultural difference. In his silence, "I often learn more than from many white men's endless talking." The private aspects of their marriage developed with similar measured patience. Swift Arrow approached physical intimacy with respectful consideration of her comfort, allowing trust to build naturally between them. Rebecca discovered unexpected passion beneath his controlled exterior, a depth of feeling that emerged in their most private moments while remaining carefully contained in public settings. Their union triggered subtle shifts throughout the camp's social structure. Mourning Dove's status rose through her connection to the unusual couple, while Young Thunder's early support of Rebecca proved politically advantageous as her position solidified. Even Singing Bird benefited from the arrangement, gaining regular access to Rebecca's knowledge of white medical practices that complemented her traditional healing methods. Most significant was the effect on Swift Arrow himself. His leadership had always commanded respect, but Rebecca observed a new dimension emerging: greater flexibility in considering alternative approaches, increased willingness to incorporate elements from outside traditional Comanche practices when they offered clear benefits. "You change him," Young Thunder remarked during a hunting expedition where Rebecca had been invited to gather specific medicinal plants that grew in areas usually visited only by male hunting parties. "Before you, my cousin saw only warrior's path, straight and narrow. Now he looks for hidden trails others might miss." Rebecca considered this assessment carefully. "Perhaps we change each other. His certainty gives me strength. My questions give him new perspectives." Young Thunder grinned, always quicker to show emotion than his more reserved cousin. "Good marriage makes both stronger, like bow and arrow. Separate, each has purpose. Together, they reach farther than either alone." This philosophical observation, so characteristic of Comanche teaching through natural metaphors, contained profound truth about their developing partnership. Rebecca had brought healing knowledge and insights from the white world that proved increasingly valuable, while Swift Arrow provided the cultural foundation and political protection that allowed her to apply these skills effectively. Their complementary strengths became particularly evident when sickness swept through the camp in late winter, a respiratory illness that left many struggling to breathe properly. Rebecca recognized symptoms similar to cases she had treated in Silver Creek, while Singing Bird identified patterns resembling previous outbreaks among the Comanche. Together, they developed a hybrid approach to treatment. Rebecca's knowledge of willow bark preparations for fever, combined with Singing Bird steam treatments using specific native plants to ease breathing. Swift Arrow organized the camp to isolate affected families, limit contagion, and ensure proper care reached everyone regardless of their previous stance toward Rebecca. When Stoneface's youngest granddaughter fell seriously ill, The confrontation Rebecca had long anticipated finally occurred. The elderly man appeared at the medicine lodge one snowy evening, his proud bearing unchanged despite the fear evident in his eyes. "My son says you have medicine for the coughing sickness," he stated without greeting, his English halting but clear enough. Medicine that saved others when singing birds' ways alone did not work. Rebecca met his gaze steadily. "I work with Singing Bird now, not separate. Our medicines together are stronger than either alone." Stoneface's jaw tightened, the internal struggle visible in his weathered face. "The child burns with fever, breathes like wounded buffalo, will die without help." The implicit request from her most dedicated opponent represented a crucial turning point. Rebecca gathered her supplies without hesitation. "Take me to her." The girl, barely 4 years old, lay burning with fever in Stoneface's lodge. Her breathing labored and painful. Rebecca worked alongside Singing Bird, who had arrived separately, each contributing their knowledge to the fight for the child's life. Throughout the night, they maintained careful vigil, administering herbal preparations, steam treatments, and cool compresses in a methodical pattern. By dawn, the crisis had passed. The girl's fever broke, her breathing eased, and she fell into natural healing sleep rather than fevered unconsciousness. Rebecca, exhausted after the night's intensity, gathered her remaining supplies to return to Swift Arrow's lodge. Stoneface stopped her at the entrance. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, decades of hatred and loss, battling with the undeniable reality of his granddaughter's recovery. "My wife died coughing blood when white man's sickness came to our people," he finally said, each word weighted with painful memory. "My daughters taken by rangers who said they rescued them from savages. I saw only white skin when I looked at you, not the person beneath." Rebecca remained silent, recognizing the monumental effort this admission required. "I will not call you friend," Stoneface continued. "Too much blood lies between our peoples. But my granddaughter lives because of your medicine working with our medicine." He paused, then added with formal dignity, "Stoneface acknowledges this debt. Though far from warm acceptance, this grudging recognition represented remarkable progress." Rebecca responded with equal formality, understanding the cultural significance of the exchange. "No debt exists between family members of the same tribe. I am Comanche now, through marriage and choice. The child's life honors both our medicines, not me alone." Something shifted in Stoneface's expression. Not friendship, but perhaps the first fragile seed of respect. He nodded once, allowing her to pass without further words. This breakthrough with her most implacable opponent reverberated through the camp's social structure. Those who had maintained distance out of respect for Stoneface's influence now felt permission to engage more openly with the white woman who had proven her commitment to the tribe's well-being. Children who had previously been kept away began approaching her with curious questions about her different appearance, while women increasingly sought her participation in communal activities. "The ice begins to thaw," Swift Arrow observed, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their lodge one night. "Stoneface's acceptance matters more than many others combined." Rebecca nodded against his chest, listening to the steady heartbeat. Beneath her ear, "Not acceptance yet, but willingness to see me as something more than enemy." "It begins there," he responded, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "Like spring thaw, change comes slowly then, all at once." As winter gradually loosened its grip on the land, Rebecca's influence expanded beyond medicine into other aspects of tribal life. Her knowledge of English and understanding of white customs provided unexpected advantages as the Comanche prepared for inevitable future interactions with settlers. During evening gatherings in the central lodge, she began teaching basic English, words to interested tribal members, primarily younger warriors and women who recognize the practical benefits of understanding the language of those encroaching on their territories. In exchange, her own command of Comanche grew steadily under Mourning Dove's patient tutelage. Knowledge of enemies' words gives advantage in negotiation, Swift Arrow explained when some questioned this unusual practice. We fight when necessary, trade when beneficial, avoid when possible. All strategies improved by understanding their talk. This pragmatic framing helped overcome resistance to what might otherwise have been viewed as inappropriate cultural mixing. Rebecca was careful to present language learning as a practical skill rather than cultural replacement, emphasizing that understanding English did not require abandoning Comanche values or perspectives. The medicine partnership with Singing Bird similarly evolved beyond immediate healing to include preventative practices Rebecca had learned from William. She introduced concepts of sanitation that complemented the Comanche's already effective practices, while learning traditional methods for maintaining health through seasonal dietary adjustments and spiritual balance. White medicine sees body as machine with broken parts to fix, Singing Bird observed during one of their knowledge-sharing sessions. Our medicine sees person connected to all things, earth, sky, ancestors, future children. Both views hold truth. This philosophical integration characterized Rebecca's approach to her unique position, not replacing Comanche wisdom with white knowledge, but finding the stronger medicine that emerged when both traditions were respected and thoughtfully combined. As preparations for spring migration began, Swift Arrow consulted Rebecca regarding potential routes and timing in relation to known settler movements. Her insights into white settlement patterns and likely military responses to Comanche presence in different territories introduced strategic considerations previously unavailable to tribal planning. The cavalry strengthens outposts along the eastern river valleys each spring, she explained, indicating locations on the rough map Swift Arrow had sketched in the dirt floor of their lodge. But they rarely patrol the western canyonlands until summer heat subsides. This practical intelligence, combined with traditional Comanche knowledge of the territory, allowed Swift Arrow to develop migration plans that minimized potential conflict, while ensuring access to essential resources. Young Thunder and other respected warriors increasingly included Rebecca in planning discussions, recognizing the advantage her unique perspective provided. "You see through different eyes," young Thunder told her during one such council. "Like hawk and fox hunting same field, each spots what the other misses." The growing respect Rebecca earned through these contributions gradually transformed her status from tolerated outsider to valued tribal member. While some resistance inevitably remained, particularly among those who had lost loved ones to white expansion, the daily reality of her commitment to Comanche well-being slowly eroded even the most entrenched opposition. Most significant was the change in Rebecca herself. The desperate widow, abandoned by her own people, had evolved into a woman of uncommon strength and unique vision, someone who moved confidently between worlds without being fully claimed by either. Her identity now incorporated elements of both her past and present, creating something entirely new that belonged exclusively to neither white nor Comanche society. "You walk taller now," Swift Arrow observed one evening as they stood together, watching sunset paint the valley in spectacular hues of orange and purple. "Your spirit has found its proper height." Rebecca considered this assessment, recognizing its accuracy. "Among my former people, I was always slightly apart. The doctor's unusual wife who knew too much about plants and healing. Here my differences became strength instead of suspicion." Swift Arrow's arm encircled her shoulders in a rare public display of affection. "The people have saying, 'What makes you different makes you powerful.' if you find proper path for that power. As spring's first tentative green appeared on south-facing slopes, Rebecca recognized that she had indeed found her proper path, not despite the cruelty that had cast her into the wilderness to die, but because of it. The journey between worlds had stripped away everything familiar, forcing her to discover strength she might never have known existed had she remained within the comfortable confines of white society. What Silver Creek had intended as her death sentence had instead become an unexpected passage to a life of greater purpose and deeper connection than she had ever imagined possible. The irony was not lost on her as she stood beside the man who had first saved her life and then, through patient acceptance of her true self, helped her discover who she might become beyond the boundaries of either of their worlds. The spring migration carried the Shadow Water Band north to summer hunting grounds, verdant plains where buffalo still roamed in sufficient numbers to sustain the Comanche way of life, though in noticeably smaller herds than in previous generations. Rebecca, now fully accepted as Swift Arrow's wife and a valued member of the tribe, traveled with a confidence that would have been unimaginable during her early days among the people. She rode her own horse now, a dappled mare Swift Arrow had selected specifically for her, steady enough for a still-improving rider, but spirited enough to keep pace with Comanche movements. Her appearance had transformed as well. Her skin sun-darkened after seasons of outdoor life, her clothing and hairstyle adopting Comanche elements while maintaining touches that reflected her unique position between worlds. Most significant was the small life growing within her, a child conceived during the winter months, now becoming visible as a gentle swell beneath her buckskin dress. This pregnancy represented more than a personal milestone. It symbolized the physical unification of two peoples, a living bridge between cultures that had known primarily conflict. "The child will be strong," Mourning Dove had declared when Rebecca first shared the news. Born of two worlds, seeing with double vision, belonging fully to the people while carrying knowledge of what lies beyond our territories. Swift Arrow's reaction had been characteristically reserved in public, merely nodding acknowledgement when Rebecca confirmed what the women already suspected. In private, however, he had placed his hand on her stomach with wonder, his stoic expression giving way to rare vulnerability. "My first wife bore no children before illness took her," he had confessed quietly. "I believed perhaps the spirits did not intend me to be a father. Now I understand they were waiting for this child, one born of courage and boundary crossing." The migration proceeded without incident until they approached the northern hunting grounds. There, young Thunder returned from a scouting expedition. With troubling news, a substantial white settlement had been established at Spirit Lake, a sacred place the band had traditionally used as summer campgrounds. "Many lodges of wood," he reported during an emergency council meeting. "Perhaps 30 families. They have cleared land for growing, built fences for cattle. Their presence blocks the best path to the buffalo grounds." Swift Arrow absorbed this information with the controlled expression that masked his thoughts from all but those who knew him best. Rebecca, however, recognized the tension in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes that signaled deep concern. "We could travel the Western Pass," offered Black Knife, now more accepting of Rebecca, but still among the more traditional voices. "It adds 4 days, but avoids conflict." "The Western Pass cannot support all our horses," Swift Arrow responded. "The grazing is poor, water unreliable. We would arrive at hunting grounds with weakened animals, making the buffalo hunt more dangerous." Rebecca listened silently, understanding the complex calculations any tribal decision required, balancing immediate needs against long-term survival, weighing multiple factors from practical resources to spiritual considerations. The Spirit Lake settlement represented more than a physical obstacle. It was an incursion on lands the Comanche considered rightfully theirs through generations of seasonal use. When the council looked to her for insight, as had become customary when dealing with white encroachment, Rebecca spoke carefully. From what young Thunder describes, this appears to be a permanent settlement, not a temporary one. These people will not simply move because we arrive. The lake belongs to the people, Stoneface declared, his grudging acceptance of Rebecca never having extended to broader tolerance for white expansion. Our ancestors' bones rest in those waters. Buffalo have birthed calves on those shores. And for generations, what right do they have to place their wooden lodges there? Rebecca could not argue with the fundamental justice of his position, yet she understood the inevitable reality better than most in the council. They believe papers from distant governments give them rights to the land. They do not recognize traditional usage as ownership. Then we must help them recognize with stronger language, young Thunder suggested, his hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. Drive them away as we have done before. Swift Arrow raised his hand, silencing further discussion. Such action brings soldiers with many guns. We must see these settlers with our own eyes before deciding. I will take a small party to observe from safe distance. His gaze met Rebecca's briefly. Though he didn't speak her name, she understood the unspoken message. Her presence would be valuable in assessing the settlement's nature and vulnerabilities. The scouting party departed at dawn. Swift Arrow, young Thunder, Black Knife, and Rebecca, riding well-rested horses that could cover ground quickly if retreat became necessary. They traveled cautiously, using ravines and wooded areas for concealment as they approached Spirit Lake. The settlement came into view by mid-afternoon, exactly as young Thunder had described, a collection of sturdy log cabins arranged in rough semicircle along the lakeshore, with cleared fields, livestock enclosures, and a central building that appeared to serve community purposes. Smoke rose from chimneys, and figures moved between structures in the routines of daily life. Rebecca studied the scene through Swift Arrow's spyglass, noting details that might escape those unfamiliar with white settlements. The quality of construction suggesting intention for permanent residence, the visible firearms carried even for routine tasks indicating awareness of potential threats, the organized layout revealing planning rather than haphazard placement. They are here to stay, she confirmed quietly. The investment in buildings and cleared land means they will defend this place. Swift Arrow nodded, his expression revealing nothing as he continued to observe the settlement. How many fighting men? Rebecca counted methodically. At least 20. Adult men visible, probably more inside or working fields we cannot see from here. All appear armed. The assessment continued in whispered Comanche, analyzing defensive positions, livestock numbers, and potential weaknesses. As they prepared to withdraw and report back to the main band, a sudden cry from the settlement froze them in position. Riders. Approaching! From the east! Came the distinct shout in English. Through the spyglass, Rebecca observed a new group arriving at the settlement, not random travelers, but a disciplined formation that sent ice through her veins. Cavalry, she whispered urgently, at least a dozen soldiers. Swift Arrow absorbed this development with characteristic calm, though the implications were clear to all. The presence of U.S. cavalry significantly altered their situation, transforming a civilian settlement into a potentially military-supported obstacle. We must hear what they discuss, Swift Arrow decided. Knowledge of their plans gives advantage. The small party retreated to a wooded ridge that offered both concealment and proximity to the settlement. As darkness fell, Swift Arrow and young Thunder prepared for closer observation, applying mud to their bodies to minimize visibility and checking weapons with methodical care. I should go with you, Rebecca suggested. I can understand everything they say, not just pieces. Swift Arrow shook his head firmly. Too dangerous. If discovered, they would kill us immediately but might take you alive. That would be worse. A fate. The unspoken reality hung between them. A white woman found with Comanche warriors would face accusations of treachery against her race, her presence raising questions neither side would want answered. Our child needs its mother, Swift Arrow added quietly, his hand briefly touching her stomach in rare public acknowledgement of their coming child. Wait here with Black Knife. We return before dawn. Rebecca watched them disappear into the darkness, torn between respect for Swift Arrow's decision and frustration at being unable to contribute her most valuable skill in this situation. She and Black Knife maintained silent vigil through the night, tending the hidden horses and keeping watch for any sign of pursuit. Swift Arrow and Young Thunder returned as promised before first light, moving like shadows through the forest until reaching their concealed position. Both appeared physically unharmed, but Swift Arrow's expression carried a gravity that immediately alarmed Rebecca. What did you learn? She asked, as they gathered close to hear his report. The soldiers bring news and supplies to the settlement, he explained, his English deliberate as he translated what they had overheard. They speak of securing the territory and protecting the frontier. More soldiers will come to build small fort near the lake. This development represented a significant escalation, not merely civilian encroachment, but military establishment in the heart of traditional Comanche territory. Young Thunder added with barely controlled anger, they spoke of rounding up hostiles before winter, using this settlement as base for operations against troublesome bands to the north. The implications were unmistakable. The Shadow Water Band faced not merely displaced hunting grounds, but potential military engagement if they remained in the region. There is more, Swift Arrow continued, his eyes meeting Rebecca's directly. They spoke of white woman taken by Comanche last year. The leader, Captain, showed paper with your face drawn on it. Rebecca's breath caught. A wanted poster? Looking for me, specifically, Swift Arrow nodded. They offer payment for information. Say you were kidnapped, husband killed by Comanche raiders. That doctor is needed for new settlements. The fabricated narrative stunned Rebecca. A complete reversal of her actual experience, transforming her abandonment into supposed kidnapping and her rescuers into her husband's murderers. The cruel irony might have been almost humorous, if not for its deadly serious implications. Silver Creek, she whispered, as understanding dawned. They can't admit what they did, abandoning a woman to die. This story protects them while giving. Soldiers reason to attack Comanche. The small scouting party returned to the main band with their troubling information. An extended council followed, with Swift Arrow presenting the facts while tribal leaders debated potential responses. Options ranged from immediate relocation to more distant hunting grounds, to potential conflict with the settlement, to diplomatic approaches through trusted traders. Throughout the heated discussion, Rebecca remained uncharacteristically silent, her thoughts churning with implications beyond the immediate tactical concern. The wanted poster represented an unexpected threat, not just to her safety, but to the entire band, her presence now endangering the very people who had saved her life. As discussions continued into evening with no clear consensus, Rebecca slipped away to the quiet isolation of a nearby stream. Swift Arrow found her there shortly after, approaching with the deliberate noise that signaled respect for her private thoughts. The council still talks, he observed, settling beside her on a fallen log. Many voices, many paths suggested. Rebecca nodded, her hands resting protectively over her growing child. My presence puts everyone in danger now. If they capture me, they'll use me to justify attacks against the band, claiming rescue of a kidnapped white woman. Swift Arrow's expression remained controlled, though his eyes revealed deeper concern. You are Comanche now, my wife, mother of my coming child. The people do not abandon family to wolves. Even when that family member brings the wolves closer, Rebecca asked quietly. The question hung between them, heavy with impossible implications. Swift Arrow finally broke the silence, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. When I found you dying in the Sunlands, I saw a woman who might bring healing to our people. I did not see all that would follow. His hand covered hers, where it rested on her stomach. Now I see more clearly. The path ahead divides like river around stone. Rebecca met his gaze, recognizing the rare vulnerability in his expression. What do you see? If you remain with us, soldiers will eventually find you. They will not believe. You stay willingly. We'll use you as reason to attack, to take more Comanche lives, more Comanche land. He paused, the words clearly difficult. If you return to White World before they find you, claim escape from captivity, perhaps their hunger to hunt us lessens. The suggestion struck Rebecca like physical pain. You want me to leave, to return to people who left me to die. Swift Arrow shook his head slowly. Want burns my heart to ash. This is not about want. This is about survival of the people, including our child. His voice dropped to near whisper. Some paths require walking alone for the good of many. Rebecca stood abruptly, emotion overwhelming her customary restraint. I cannot return to that world. I am not that woman anymore, and our child would grow up never knowing its father, its heritage. Unless another path appears, Swift Arrow responded, standing to face her directly. Unless we find way to exist between worlds, as you have learned to do. As moonlight filtered through branches overhead, two people from vastly different worlds confronted an impossible choice. Between personal happiness and collective survival, between hard-won belonging and necessary sacrifice. Their private struggle mirrored the larger conflict between cultures, each fighting for existence in a rapidly changing landscape where old certainties disappeared like morning mist. Whatever decision they reached that night beside the quiet stream would shape not only their personal futures, but potentially the fate of the entire Shadowwater band. Two worlds had collided in the most intimate way possible, through love, through family, through the unborn child who embodied both conflict and hope. Rebecca Hayes had once been left to die by cruel settlers who feared what they didn't understand. Saved by a Comanche warrior who recognized her value beyond her white skin, she had found unexpected belonging in a world entirely different from everything she had known before. Now the ultimate test of that belonging lay not in remaining against all odds, but in finding the wisdom and courage to determine what true loyalty demanded, even if that path led in directions neither could have anticipated when their journey together began. As they stood facing each other in the moonlight, the story of the widow and the warrior approached its most difficult chapter, one that would determine whether bridges between worlds could endure when those worlds themselves refused to coexist in peace. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.